Hola, one and all. Welcome back to Soul Mechanics. Not too long ago, a while back, our resident film critic, video critic, suggested that I film videos in an outdoor setting. And since it's a nice day out and I got tired of the kitchen, I still don't want to go back to my apartment right now. And I do feel kind of better actually sitting on the ground. Directly on the ground. So we're filming this outside. Obviously it's not the most beautiful settings and the lighting kind of sucks, but I mean shit, you can't see a fucking thing, can you? Whatever. This video also is going to be semi-promotional for the podcast that we intend to launch in the coming weeks, and maybe a week or so. A partner of mine and I are going to be launching a podcast. We're gonna do interviews with people that are important given certain circumstances, maybe representatives from the imperative, and just generally people that are a little lesser known to help promote both us and them, and maybe move up eventually. But she wants to focus on people with metaphysical interests for the most part, or people who are actually practicing casters, their experiences, their struggles. So that's what we're going to be focusing on. But the first few interviews are lined up. With, we have an alchemist, we have myself and her obviously to introduce ourselves, we have a practicing caster, so we're going to fall into line eventually, but we're beginning with the alchemist, who isn't necessarily a caster, but along those lines, still in the field. In any case, this is the video I promised a while back, following up on the intuition video. This is going to be speaking to the philosophical interests or measures of intuition, which traditionally, philosophically speaking, you might regard something as being intuitive. You regard a person as being intuitive in the sense that they have a capacity for intuition, but usually we'd refer to experiences as being intuitive. To fall back on the video game scenario again, we have, you play video games with the remote usually, or if you play on PC, you play with the keypad, and once you've played a couple video games, you got a feel for it. So from there on, and especially since most games are designed in a similar fashion depending on their genre or their style, first-person shooters are going to have the same sort of button configuration, at the very least mapping schematic for movement, and switching out weapons and firing and all these. You might have a trigger on the keypad, or you might have the mouse click, whatever the case may be. Once you've played a couple of games, playing other games after that is going to be regarded intuitive. You're going to know how to do it, and this is again because you're going to have a feel for how to do it intuitively. And this is again going to be speaking to the brain's ability, or rather its capacity and its tendency to collect items of interest and inferences and references in your perception. And as I've stated, the brain is constantly collecting objects of inference, objects of interest, articles of inference and reference, and that's going to be the two major points there, inference and reference, which is going to speak to pretty much the difference between primers and cueing, which I've done another video on in the Principal Dynamics course, speaking to primers and cueing. But it's kind of it's somewhat of a complex kind of scenario or topic to speak of, subject matter, so we can keep it extrapolating on that. In any case, throughout your experiences, your brain is collecting these references and inferences, and it's going to make use of common, I suppose you could say, sort of themes in your environment and in your experience, that it's going to recognize certain patterns, it's going to recognize objects, faces, whatever the patterns may be. It's going to recognize these, and it's also going to make associations. This falls into the realm of association in the brain, where relationships are formed between two or more things that connect them to it. This is a mnemonic faculty. And you could say that your intuition, you can increase your capacity for intuition simply by experiencing. The more that you experience, the more things that you come in contact with, the more differing experiences you have, the more items that come into play in your perception, in your perspective, the more your brain's going to have to categorize that it can make use of. And so, like, you know, you do a certain job, you're going to have a feel for it, for that line of work. You play a certain game, you're going to have a feel for that sort of game. And it becomes an intuitive faculty where, you know, you kind of know how to do it. Now, speaking to intuition as a sense, more of as a sense than, I mean, I suppose you could say this measure is still sensory, but in the sense that we have intuition that allows for us to know things are coming in advance and such, and we've already spoken to the brain being ahead of your experience, so that, you know, you in fact actually do see things coming in advance. It's going to be a matter of how fast you're actually keeping up with your experience, which is something that I'm not sure. I mean, it's been trained. I can train it. I've conditioned myself to move a little faster in that regard, but I'm not sure if it's something that, if there are certain other factors that need to come into play in order for somebody to be conditioned in this factor. That we'll get into that later, and, you know, that'll be a part of the investigation. But as we know it, your brain's going to be collecting items of interest for the most part, and it's going to make associations between what you perceive of things and what they mean to you. And that's what the brain and the world is going to use as cues in your environment. It's going to make associations, and this operates under a sort of you could say, by a superstitious nature, where you might be programmed to believe certain things mean certain things, where in fact they really don't. Like for me, the black cats being a cue, which ultimately, dating back to the origins of that specific superstition, black cats are generally thought of, black cats crossing your path is thought of to be a change in your luck. And thereby, if you're having good luck, you might start getting bad luck. You can watch out for that, generally speaking. But most people tend to think that black cats are bad luck, or mean bad luck. So I turn that around and I say, well, I'm going to consider that black cats crossing my path is good luck, and thereby something to be followed. And so that cue gets made use of, especially considering that there are so many strays in the neighborhood where I live. That cue, the world makes use of that cue all the time. I'll see a black cat, I'll follow it, it'll lead me to something, either what I was looking for, or it'll lead me to something I wasn't necessarily looking for, but is, you know, beneficial to me in some way. And lead me to another cue, lead me down a path of synchronicities. Now, that's going to be in reference to cues, and again, you can program this by just simply conditioning your brain to make an association between one thing and a meaning that you give it. So, you know, find something that is common in your environment that you're likely to run into often, is that makes it easier for the world to produce it on the spot at any given point in time, and you make an association, you program an association of whatever you want for that thing to mean to you, you know, tell you either to go this way or watch out, you know, attention pretty much, and then, you know, one way or the other, good or bad, basically is the programming you're going to give it, what you could call subroutines. The subroutines here would be black cats, meaning is fortune, subroutine, good. And that's the programming I put in play, and repeating that, the world is going to make use of it. Now, primers, on the other hand, aside from cueing, and this is, remember, we're speaking to intuition here. The theory that we're positing ultimately is that the world is all one soul, it's one mind, it's all one dream. So your intuition, your capacity for intuition, especially insofar as regards synchronicity, is going to be presented in the world around you. The world that you're living in is an extension of your mind. So intuition comes in physical forms, basically. And ultimately it's all physical, but, you know, you might have thoughts, feelings and such that are associated to certain, certain decisions in your mind, of making certain decisions that will allow for you to move intuitively and make decisions intuitively. But for the most part, it's going to be regarding the collection of data that your brain has stored, what it knows, and obviously thereby the less you know, or the less you've experienced, the lesser powerful or capable your intuition is going to be. The more that you experience, the more you have stored in your mental inventory, the more effective your intuition is going to be, simply because it already knows more. It's going to pull at data you're aware of. It's going to pull at information you have available and make use of it. And the brain is capable of making astounding associations, for example, between two things, like, even, for example, playing a video game like a first-person shooter. You can actually learn how to be more capable in the real world from doing that, not because it's a simulation of it so much as it's providing you with information that can become intuitive. Of course, video games aren't going to really keep up with the reality of scenarios so much, so it's not really something reliable, but it's an example. Now, speaking of primers rather than cues are going to be the items of inference that you see in your environment that speak to certain meanings you have in play regarding those items, those objects, persons, places, whatever. Now, not places. Places are going to fit. Well, places could be, insofar as, like, if you see a picture of a place or you're reminded of a place, your brain's going to think of a certain place. If it has a meaning for you, that's going to be in play. But for the most part, places, and especially certain areas in places, like in one video I spoke to, in the primer and cueing video, I spoke to a primer being a certain refrigerator in the Family Dollar that always has the Coke bottles with the names on it. And when I see certain persons' names that I know, it alerts me that there's something going on with that person, or that they're going to contact me shortly. And this never fails, because my brain stored that specific refrigerator in that specific location as a primer. It's something that my brain knows I'm going to come across frequently, and that it can make use of to deliver cues. So primers are going to be delivery mechanisms for cues, while cues are going to be the actual, objects that you see, or the circumstances that arise. And so this is speaking to how things become intuitive, and how you can make use of your intuition, how you can train it, and how you can, for the most part, comprehend it and read your intuition, really, insofar as it concerns synchronicity specifically. And that does harken back to the philosophical ideologies of something being intuitive. Is going to, we can expound on this now with what the brain's capacity for absorbing information and storing, categorizing, or cataloging information. We can expound on this with the DNA's capacity for having information already pre-installed, like your phone comes with pre-installed apps. It's part of the operating system. Your DNA has your operating system writ into it, and it would be hypothesized, at the very least, if not just thoroughly understood, that the DNA does in fact store memory data from previous generations. And if you go far enough back, we all come from the same fucking place, so everybody should have relatively the same sort of information for the most part. Culturally speaking, things are going to differ from time to time, but pretty much basically, insofar as regards survival, instinct, which is what I'd like to go ahead and just say, that intuition as it stands, I'd really regard intuition as a sense. I'd regard as a sense of instinct, really more an intuition. But this would be speaking to what intuition actually means, that something is intuitive for you as a human being because your body is programmed to know how to do it for the most part, or at least to have an idea. Problem solving, for example, base in and of itself, just problem solving, but actually having methods by which to solve certain problems, solutions in mind already, that's going to be speaking to intuition, a philosophical measure of intuition. And of course, this falls into categories such as ethics and morality, and it extrapolates in so many different ways. So I suppose we're going to have to make other videos speaking to that. But basically, that's going to be the gist of it as regards synchronicity, is collect memory data, play it like a game, as usual. As always, play it like a game. Collect memory data through experiences and work on actually conditioning what certain things are going to mean to you, what certain pieces of memory mean, what meaning they hold for you personally. And try to use ones that are specific or unique to you. Like, for example, the black cats, for me, that's going directly against what most people believe black cats are supposed to mean. Thereby, it's going to hold a significant value for me. Of course, if I'm with other people and that black cat's there for them, that could be a nuisance. I suppose I hadn't really thought of that. Anyways, we'll get into measures by which you can actually train this, but it's simple mnemonics. Just attach associations, create relationships by conditioning yourself to move fast enough to be on the ball with something. When you encounter something, immediately associate a feeling or a meaning to it. And just continue to do that enough, and it can happen fast. I mean, it can happen really fast. But, depending on the personality, depending on the circumstances, the speed at which this transpires will differ, but it will happen. It's not going to take you like months and months to program something and do it in a week or so. Most people, I can do it in a day. So I guess that's speaking both to the philosophical measures of intuition and to how to make use of intuition. Again, extrapolating from our individual brains holding memory data. We have memory data stored in our bodies that and again, then there's memory data stored in the world around us everywhere. Everything records memory. Some things are denser than others and a little more difficult for it to actually store memory data, but everything does to some extent record the memory of what's happening around it. Everything is sharing this vibration, this underlying vibration that's shaping, folding everything. And that's where a fourth dimension is going to come into play. We'll speak to that again in the remaining adjunct for the dimensional quality series. But memory data is going to be stored in the environment as well, that you can make use of depending on your sensitivity, depending on training, depending on your general belief structure, really. And again, opening up those chakras depending on your belief structure and your psychological situation for the most part. So that's giving you an idea. I can't really carry on with this video because I don't have enough space, but that's giving a good idea of what we see intuition as being in a larger overall. The theory in the past video regarding intuition as being, memory of past experiences that are replaying for the most part. That's a little out there. That's a further, that's lesser known, lesser accepted. This one would be the basic understanding of intuition as we know it, and how it works and why it works the way it does. So keep in mind that a lot of people get feelings and such, maybe a bad feeling about something that's about to happen. They don't know why. It's likely going to be because a cue presented in the environment that you just weren't aware of. The environment's always going to be presenting you cues, just most people aren't paying attention to them because they don't really think they're there, or they don't think that, a lot of people seem to think that everything happened in the world without any reason or meaning, which is absolutely absurd. But that for anybody who wants to investigate this, that's going to be the measure by which to do it. Program triggering mechanisms, cues, primers in your brain manually, and take it for a test run using the spot checking exercises I've given you in earlier videos. We'll see if we have to pick this up later on, but for now, that's about all I have to say on the general, ultimate, overall theory of what intuition is and why it works. It's based on your mental inventory and your ability to access it. So not only your ability to access it, but your personal effectiveness in making use of it. So I think that's that for now. I'm sorry if I forgot anything, but thank you so much for watching. Remember, the podcast is going to kick ass, so I will give everybody updates on when that actually releases and what it's called and everything. We haven't decided on the title ultimately yet, but we do have the first few interviews lined up. In any case, again, thank you so much for watching. Love you guys. Sorry about the can't see me, but I see you. Keelah, Taerve, siari, Namasté.